It only took 3 seconds to turn 4 years of loyalty into suspicion. I counted them. 1. The glass door to the conference room slammed open, shaking the frame so hard one of the ceiling lights flickered. 2. 12 heads snapped toward the doorway, eyes wide as if they already sensed the storm behind it. 3. Victor Langston, CEO of Orion Stratagem, marched in with a folder in his hand, eyes locked on mine, and hissed, "It's always the quiet ones." The room froze. I didn't move. No one did. The air turned heavy, thick with confusion and dread. Victor threw the folder across the table. It slid to a stop right in front of me, splaying open with pages of printed spreadsheets, red ink annotations circling numbers I'd seen before. But never like this. 12 people. "One of you is bleeding my company dry," Victor growled, pacing to the front of the room like he owned the oxygen we were breathing. $2.3 million. Gone. Siphoned over the past 8 months. Through this team. This very room. I could feel the temperature drop around me, or maybe it was just the cold sweat rising along my back. "I'm Julia Winslow, 33, financial compliance specialist at Orion Stratagem. For years at this company. For years of staying late, documenting everything, playing the part of the meticulous, invisible backbone. I was never the loudest, never the flashiest, just the one who never made mistakes. Or so I thought. Until now." Victor turned and pointed directly at me. Not metaphorically. Literally. His finger was inches from my face. And who better to hide it than the person in charge of tracking every dollar? 12 sets of eyes shifted toward me, all at once. People I worked beside every day. Janelle, the office manager who brought me tea when I was swamped. Miles, our quiet IT guy, who once fixed my laptop in silence and left a sticky note that said, "Stay sharp." Even Nathan, our team lead, he used to praise me for keeping the budget airtight. Now, they all stared like I was something foreign. Contagious. Victor wasn't done. These weren't big withdrawals. They were clever, discreet, spread across dozens of accounts and dozens of projects. But our external auditors finally caught the pattern. Microtransactions, adjustments, approvals made under your name, Miss Winslow. My voice caught in my throat. The spreadsheet in front of me might as well have been in flames. I'd seen those numbers before, every one of them. And yes, I'd signed off on many, but not like this. Not in this configuration. Victor leaned over me, his shadow stretching long across the table. "I trusted you, Julia. I moved you into special accounts because I thought you had integrity. But maybe I just handed the fox the keys to the henhouse." A flush of heat surged into my cheeks. My lips parted, but I couldn't make a sound. My mind was sprinting in 10 directions, none of them finding oxygen. "Security is checking your computer now," Nathan said, too quickly. I turned to him, startled. His face was unreadable. Victor didn't even look surprised. "Already done," he said flatly. "And we've found plenty." That's when it hit me. This wasn't a discovery. It was an ambush. Every step had been choreographed. Every gaze pre-aligned. Every word rehearsed. And I was the lead in a play I never auditioned for. But here's the thing no one realized about quiet people. We don't stay quiet because we're weak. We stay quiet because we're always watching. And I had been watching for a very long time. 8 months ago, Victor Langston called me into his corner office. He didn't offer a seat, just pointed to a chart on the screen behind him and said, "Special accounts. Need someone with your eyes." I remember blinking twice before I responded. "What happened to Rebecca?" I asked. "Maternity leave," he lied. I'd find out later she'd resigned abruptly after raising concerns. Concerns I wouldn't understand until much later. At the time, I thought it was a promotion. I wasn't given a raise, of course, but I was told it was strategic exposure, a stepping stone. Victor used words like precision and trust, and I fell for them. The special accounts division handled our most complex client portfolios, high net worth individuals, legacy contracts, government adjacent firms, clients where discretion and accuracy were not just important, but sacred. It was supposed to be an honor. Instead, it was a trap. Victor's voice pulled me back to the present. He was pacing now, sleeves rolled, tie slightly askew. These irregularities go back exactly 8 months, he said, pausing dramatically, which also happens to be when Julia was moved into this team. Coincidence? No one answered. Every single flag transaction was routed through her, he continued. Subtle tweaks to invoices, time-stamped approvals, adjusted balances, all signed off by our compliance specialist herself. I could feel it happening again, that slow-motion collapse of credibility. One breath at a time, the air left the room. Janelle shifted in her seat. Nathan looked away. Miles scratched his neck without looking up. Victor pressed the spacebar on his laptop, and the screen behind him lit up with a single number. $2,312,987.56. Red font. Oversized. Accusatory. This, he said, is what's missing. Then he turned to me again. And unless someone in here wants to confess to fraud before the authorities arrive, I'm going to assume it's the one person whose name is on all the paperwork. Authorities. He had called the police. My stomach flipped. I've done nothing wrong, I finally said, but my voice came out thinner than I intended. Victor laughed. Not loudly. Just that cold, dismissive kind of laugh people use when they think they've already won. Oh, Julia, he said. You're good with numbers, but you're not smarter than me. He started walking toward me again, slow and deliberate. You thought you could move money in micro-adjustments and no one would notice. You thought compliance was a shield. It's not. It's a paper trail. He leaned in close, whispering just loud enough for the room to hear, and paper trails always lead home. For a moment, no one spoke, but inside me something cracked. Not with fear, not with guilt. Clarity. If they wanted to follow the trail, they were about to discover where it really led. I don't remember standing up. One moment I was frozen in my chair, the next I was on my feet, hand steady, heart strangely calm. Fear has a ceiling. Once you crash through it, what's left isn't panic, it's precision. Mr. Langston, I said, and for the first time my voice didn't tremble. You might want to see this. Victor smirked. A confession? How thoughtful. Not quite. I pulled out my phone, tapped the secure folder icon on my home screen, and handed it to him. I suggest you start with the second video, the one dated February 11th. He took it like someone humoring a delusional intern, until he pressed play. First came the audio, his own voice, crisp and irrefutable. Go ahead and push the invoice through. I'll handle the adjustment notes later. Then the screen recording, me opening the original spreadsheet, his cursor hovering over my shoulder, instructing changes line by line. His smirk evaporated. What is this? He whispered. The first of many, I replied. I turned to the rest of the room. 10 months ago, before I joined special accounts, I noticed a pattern. Small discrepancies in cleared payments. Nothing that raised flags, just wrong. I glanced at Janelle, who now looked stricken. I took it to my old supervisor. She dismissed it, said I was overanalyzing. So I started documenting. I explained how I'd built a private archive, screenshots, backup files, timestamp comparisons. I even recorded certain meetings, including every instance Victor gave me verbal directives to bypass standard review protocols. Miles whispered, You recorded private meetings? Chicago is a one-party consent state, I said flatly. And I was that one party. Victor's face had gone pale, but he was still clinging to the edge of control. This is a violation of company policy, he spat. You've breached confidentiality. Interesting, I cut in, that your first concern isn't the $2.3 million in fraud. It's your image. There was a long, dangerous silence. Nathan slowly reached for the folder Victor had thrown on the table earlier and flipped through it again, this time more carefully. Janelle leaned in. "You forged our approvals?" she asked Victor, her voice barely above a whisper. Victor didn't answer. He didn't have to. Everything I had shown them was real. Every recording, every digital fingerprint, every annotated file. It all pointed to the same conclusion. The fraud hadn't come from within the team. It had come from above. I looked back at Victor. There's more. Much more. All of it backed up to 3 different secure locations, including my attorney's office. I paused, and I forwarded the entire folder to the FBI at 8:05 this morning. The last thing Victor said before storming out of the room was a single word: security. But no one followed him, because now they all knew. The quiet one had been watching. Victor didn't return to the conference room. Not that day. Not ever. Security showed up 5 minutes later. 2 men in black polos who looked confused until Janelle calmly pointed toward the CEO's office and said, "You might want to knock first." One of them raised an eyebrow but obeyed. They disappeared down the hallway, and a beat later we heard the unmistakable sound of a door slamming shut from the inside. Victor had barricaded himself in. I sank back into my chair, my knees finally registering their exhaustion. The adrenaline was crashing out of my bloodstream fast, leaving a hollow cold behind. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how hard I was shaking. Nobody spoke. Miles brought me a glass of water. Janelle hovered close, almost protectively. Nathan, who'd once eagerly suggested checking my computer, couldn't meet my eyes. 10 minutes passed like fog. Then 20. Then the elevator dinged. They didn't wear uniforms. No dark jackets, no mirrored sunglasses. But everyone knew. You could feel it in the way they walked, in the quiet authority that followed them in like a second shadow. 2 FBI agents, a man and a woman. The woman stepped forward first. "Julia Winslow," she asked. I nodded, forcing myself to stand. "You have something for us." I pulled my phone from my pocket. "It's all here, and it's backed up in case anything happens to it." She took it gently. "How long have you been compiling this?" 10 months, I said, "since I first noticed something didn't add up." Her eyes widened slightly, just for a moment. Then she gave a nod that almost felt like respect. "We'll take it from here," she said. They walked straight into Victor's office. He didn't walk out. He was escorted. Not in handcuffs, not yet, but everyone could see the white knuckles, the clenched jaw, the way his eyes never left mine as he passed through the room. He stopped beside me just long enough to whisper something only I could hear. "You'll regret this." His breath was sour with fear. "No one hires a whistleblower, Julia." Then he was gone. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I didn't feel anything. I was too drained to even process what had just happened. The room slowly emptied, people scattering like ash after a fire. I remained seated at the long glass table, alone in the silence that followed the storm. 2 hours later, I was still sitting there when my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Julia, it's Sienna." Her voice was low, cautious. "Sienna." I repeated, confused. She'd been out on medical leave for weeks. "I heard what happened. Everyone has. I'm calling because the board wants to meet with you." I blinked. "Why?" "They're not saying yet. But you should know. They've already suspended 3 other executives. This isn't just about Victor anymore." She paused, then added quietly, "They think you might be the only one left they can trust." The next morning, I walked into Orion Stratagem's executive wing for the first time without a badge escort. The receptionist didn't ask who I was there to see. She just nodded and said, "They're waiting in Conference B." Funny. Yesterday, I'd been a liability. Today, I was suddenly indispensable. The room was nothing like the conference table I'd been humiliated at 24 hours earlier. This one was all walnut wood, leather chairs, and floor-to-ceiling views of Chicago's skyline. 7 people sat waiting, some familiar faces from the board, some I'd only seen in annual reports. The chairwoman, Diane Mercer, stood as I entered. "Miss Winslow," she greeted, cool and formal. "Thank you for coming on short notice." I nodded, silent. I'd learned that silence made powerful people uncomfortable. She continued, "We've reviewed your materials thoroughly. What you did may have saved this company from catastrophic liability." I didn't respond. I wasn't here for applause. Lawrence Chen, corporate counsel, spoke next. "The fraud goes deeper than we thought. 18 months, 7 executives. 4 already resigned. 3 are contesting termination." My throat tightened. I thought of the 11 others in special accounts. All of them had been collateral damage. What happens to my team? I asked. Diane folded her hands. "That's partly why we asked you here." She exchanged glances with Lawrence, then looked back at me. "We want you to lead the new financial compliance division. Director level. You'll report directly to the board. Choose your own staff. Substantial compensation increase." I blinked. I hadn't expected this. Not so soon. "Why me?" I asked. Lawrence replied, "Because you're the only one who acted with integrity, and because, frankly, we have a credibility problem." There it was. Not reverence. Not even respect. They needed me to save their image. Still, I didn't answer right away. "I'll consider it," I said finally, "but I have conditions." The room shifted. A ripple of surprise. Diane raised an eyebrow. "We're open to discussion." "First," I said, "a company-wide statement clearing my team's name. Not vague. Explicit. Every member exonerated. And bonuses. They deserve it." Lawrence scribbled a note. "Reasonable." "Second, I want to personally interview every finance department employee. Anyone who stays will report to me, and I need to trust them." More nods. "Third," I said, and this time I looked Diane in the eye, "I want Victor Langston's office." Silence. "That office is reserved for senior executives," someone muttered. "So was embezzling $2.3 million, I replied. "We're already off script." Diane studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Done." I took a slow breath. Last one. No NDA. I won't slander the company, but I won't sign away my right to speak. That silenced the room. Lawrence adjusted his tie. "That's highly unusual. So is being almost arrested for someone else's crimes." No one argued. 45 minutes later, I walked out with everything in writing. Authority, autonomy, and something far more valuable than any of it, leverage. The next morning, I walked into Victor Langston's former office with a strange sense of detachment. The space was immaculate. Leather chairs, chrome fixtures, a mahogany desk so polished I could see my reflection in it. Just weeks ago, I'd stood outside this very room, waiting to be summoned. Now it was mine. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pose for a picture or call anyone to gloat. Instead, I sat down in his chair and let the silence press in. The walls still smelled like his cologne. There were faint grooves in the armrest where his fingers must have dug in during calls. It felt haunted. A knock broke the stillness. Janelle stepped in holding a tiny potted plant. "Office warming gift," she said, placing it on the edge of the desk. "Low maintenance. Hard to kill. Kind of like your career, apparently." I laughed, a real laugh, the first in what felt like forever. "Have you heard from the others?" I asked. She nodded. "Everyone's getting called in for reassignment meetings today. Word's out you're rebuilding the team." "I am," I said. "Starting with you." She blinked. "Me?" "I need a deputy. Someone organized. Sharp. Loyal." I looked at her. Someone who stood up for me when no one else did. Her face flushed, but she nodded. "Okay, I'm in." The rest of the week passed in a blur of interviews, paperwork, and tough decisions. I brought Miles in to design new internal monitoring systems, custom-coded, independent of IT's old frameworks. He didn't say much when I asked, just nodded once and got to work. Sienna returned from medical leave early to take over external communications. She'd seen how quickly the company had spun narratives before. I trusted her to control the message now. Even Nathan, who had once suggested checking my computer, sat across from me with an apology in his eyes. He didn't make excuses. He just said I was wrong. You didn't deserve that. I didn't forgive him outright, but I gave him a chance. Because remorse, when sincere, is a form of strength. Not everyone returned. Devin, our marketing analyst, declined my offer. I'm sorry, Julia, he said over the phone, but this place is tainted for me now. I've accepted a role elsewhere. I understood. Some people rebuild. Others start over. And rebuilding wasn't easy. Not even close. 16-hour days. Buried invoices. Systems we had to unlearn and rewire from the ground up. Every new discovery reminded me just how close I'd come to taking the fall for someone else's sins. But there was power in the work. A kind of quiet, righteous energy that came from knowing you were putting something right. And from knowing that this time, you weren't alone. 3 months into the rebuild, things were beginning to stabilize. The new protocols, what the board had started calling the Winslow standards, were fully operational. Compliance training was mandatory across departments. Transparency wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. For the first time, I felt like we were building something honest. And then the message came. It was a Sunday evening. I just settled into my couch with a bowl of soup and my laptop when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. 1 sentence. You think you've won? Enjoy it while it lasts. No signature. No context. But I knew. Victor. My hands went cold. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for another ping. Nothing came. Just that one line and the weight it carried. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the apartment made me flinch. I double-checked the locks, then checked them again. Somewhere inside me, a childlike fear bloomed. That fear of shadows under the door, of threats you can't name but feel closing in. The next morning, I showed the message to Lawrence. He read it once, then again, jaw tightening. We'll handle this, he said. Victor's already under investigation by 3 federal agencies. He sends one more thing like this. It'll count as witness intimidation. But legal reassurances don't silence dread. That night, I turned off my phone before bed. I couldn't keep living in anticipation of a ping. The next day, I arrived at the office early. The building was still quiet, bathed in morning light. I sat at my desk, pulled open my laptop, and tried to shake off the tension. A few minutes later, a new alert popped up, not from Victor. This one was from the Chicago Tribune. Former Orion CEO Victor Langston arrested on federal fraud charges. The headline hit me like wind. I clicked, scanning every detail. They'd found evidence of similar embezzlement schemes at his 2 previous companies. Same patterns, same tactics. Only this time, he hadn't gotten out fast enough. His mugshot stared back at me from the article. Eyes sunken, suit rumpled, deflated. And still, somehow, I felt no satisfaction. No triumph. Just exhaustion. Later that day, I ran into Diane Mercer in the elevator. She gave me a long look and said, "You saw the news?" I nodded. "The prosecutors called. They want you to testify." My heart skipped. Of course they did, because the story wasn't finished yet. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in early December. The night before, I sat across from Lawrence in a dimly lit conference room, a legal pad in front of me, my pen untouched. "Just tell the truth," he said. "That's all you need to do." But it didn't feel that simple. Walking into that courtroom felt like walking into the same room I'd been ambushed in. Just colder, more sterile, with higher stakes. My suit was charcoal gray, plain but strong. My notes were organized in a slim black folder. My pulse was steady until I saw him. Victor Langston. He sat beside his attorney, thinner than I remembered, face lined with tension, suit hanging off his frame like borrowed armor. When he looked up and saw me, his expression shifted instantly, blank to venomous, like a switch being flipped. I didn't flinch. I took the stand, raised my right hand, swore the oath, and I began. I walked them through everything. How I was transferred to special accounts, the verbal instructions, the micro adjustments, the moment I realized what I was being positioned for. I referenced documentation, pointed to timestamps, even described the hesitation I felt before every compliance override he asked me to approve. Victor's lawyer tried to paint me as the opportunist. "Isn't it convenient," he asked, "that you were promoted shortly after accusing your superior of fraud?" "There was nothing convenient about any of this," I replied. "I lost colleagues. I lost sleep. I still triple-check my locks every night. But I didn't have a choice. It was either speak up or go to prison for something I didn't do." I could feel the jury watching me, not as some martyr or hero, but as a woman who simply refused to be erased. When the questioning ended, I stepped down and walked past Victor without making eye contact. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Reporters called out, asking how it felt to take down my former boss, whether I considered myself a whistleblower or a role model. I said nothing, because this wasn't about glory. It was about survival. 6 months later, Victor Langston pled guilty to multiple counts of federal fraud. The details went public: gambling debts, shell accounts, exit strategies. He'd been preparing to disappear. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, and Orion Stratagem survived. We lost clients at first, but then we gained new ones, companies who valued transparency, who wanted to work with people that had already been through fire and chosen integrity over protection. The Winslow standards became the new gold line in financial compliance. My team, those who stayed, became more than colleagues. We were survivors, and we had rebuilt something real, together. 1 year to the day after Victor Langston stormed into that glass conference room and accused me of stealing from the company I'd given everything to, I stood before my team in the new compliance division. We weren't dressed in suits that day. No conference table, no projector screens. Just people, real people, sitting in the lounge we'd repurposed from an unused executive break room. Another quiet rebellion. "I want to thank you," I said, looking around at them: Janelle, Miles, Santa, Nathan, even a few newer faces I'd personally vetted. A year ago, we were nearly destroyed by someone who thought power meant never being questioned. You could have left, found safer jobs, but you stayed. You chose to rebuild with me. Janelle raised her coffee mug and said, "We stayed because of you, Julia. You showed us what real leadership looks like." That night, I sat alone in what was once Victor's office. It didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt earned. I looked out at the Chicago skyline and thought about how far I'd come. I never wanted power. I never asked to be the center of anything. All I ever wanted was to do my job well and be treated with basic respect. Instead, I had been dragged into a war I didn't start, but I finished it. And somewhere along the way, I became someone I never expected to be. 2 years after the day everything collapsed, I was promoted to CFO, the youngest in the company's history. That afternoon, a plain white envelope arrived on my desk. No return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping of my promotion, and one handwritten line in familiar ink. "Congratulations. You won." No name, no threat, just that. I didn't respond. Some victories don't need acknowledgement. Sometimes living well really is the best revenge. So if you're watching this and something in my story feels familiar, if you're the quiet one in the room, the careful one, the one who always notices what others miss, know this: your silence isn't weakness. Your attention isn't overthinking. It might just be your greatest strength. And if you're the kind of person who abuses power, who thinks no one's watching, you should remember something. 2. The quiet ones are watching. Always.